How's it going, guys? On today's episode of Creeping It Real with Rob, we're going to be talking about tips and tricks when you're working with your tarantulas and doing a couple of rehouses here so you can see how I do things. Might be a little bit different than how other people do them, but I'm going to give you the rundown of how I kind of work with things and some of the tools that I use. So first off, we're going to talk about the different tools that I use when I'm working with my tarantulas. Some of those important things I think to have on hand pretty much all the time are some of the things that I've got in front of me right here. So down on this end, I just got some flashlights and a headlamp. Basically, when you're working with them, it allows you to see inside of the enclosures and kind of figure out whereabouts the spider is, especially if you don't have the greatest lighting in your room. It's important to always know what you're looking at and be able to tell what's going on in front of you. So I always use a headlamp or flashlight to kind of, when I'm working with my spiders, to kind of know what's going on. Another thing that I always use is tweezers, because even though most tarantula species are not considered life-threatening if they bite you, it's still something that you want to avoid. Getting bit by a tarantula is completely avoidable. I've been working with tarantulas for over 20 years and I've never once been bit, and I like to keep it that way. So the tweezers are a very helpful tool for making sure that you can feed the animal, or if you need to pull a molt out of something, or do some cage maintenance or something like that without removing the animal, you can use that, and then generally your fingers are pretty safe. Another thing that I usually use is either a wooden dowel, or some people use straws or paint brushes, just something that you can kind of manipulate the animal without using your fingers. Again, tarantulas and spiders, most spiders have got pretty poor eyesight, so when you're working with them, it's very important that, for me, to keep my fingers away from the business end, keep it away from the possibility of getting bit. There's absolutely no reason to get within that realm of being close enough where you should get bit with most species, especially where I keep a lot of Asian species that are very prone to wanting to bite or being hyper defensive. So I really stress, using every precaution whenever you're working with some of these species in order so you can stay safe and it stresses the animal out as minimal as possible. The other thing that I've got right here is a catch cup, very basic, just a small deli container with a lid, so that if the animal does get out for whatever reason or get away from you, you've got something that you can pop right down on the top of it, and then you can work your lid under there and then successfully or safely transfer that animal a little bit better than if you're using your hands, or if you're just kind of directing it towards an enclosure. It's a lot easier to use a catch cup and work with things than it would be to try and use other tools. So those are some of the most important things I've found when working with tarantulas. It's very helpful for me when I've been working with them, and it's basically my go-to guide whenever I recommend people, the core things that you should get and own when you are owning tarantulas. These are some of the items that I use every single day when I'm working with my spiders, and something that I recommend to new people. So we're going to talk about a couple different kinds of things here. We're going to be doing a couple of rehouses, and I'm going to demonstrate what kind of is to do a little bit of a difficult animal. I've got one here that I know pretty much runs every single time that I move it. So we're going to be talking about that. I've got a tub here to substitute, because a lot of times when I do my rehouses, I do them in the bathtub. It kind of makes it so that the animal doesn't have a place to hide under things, or to get under things, or get into things. In a room, there might be 1,000 places to hide, lots of things that they can get under, couches, TVs, whatever. And so doing rehouses in a tub like this, it's got tall walls, will give you some time to react with your catch cup, or doing it in the bathtub is the same thing. It's basically meant to cut down on the possibility of the animal getting away from you, and also making sure it stays contained. So we'll cut here in just a second, and then we'll go to some rehousing. So we're going to do a quick rehouse here with one of my Poecilotharia subfuscas, a Highland ivory ornamental, and hopefully this will go pretty smoothly. So there's a couple different ways that you can do a rehouse, and I'll kind of demo them real quick before we get started with them. So down in here, we've got the enclosure that the animal is currently in, and then I've got the upgrade, the next enclosure size that it's going to be going into. For working with this, I've always got my tools, so I've got my tweezers here if I need them. I've got my dowel or my straw to manipulate the animal, and I've got my catch cup in case anything goes awry. Hopefully I won't need this. So there's a couple different ways that you can do a rehouse with your tarantulas. For arboreal stuff, and honestly terrestrial stuff works pretty well too. One of the ways that you can do is open up your enclosure, use your manipulation tool, and scoot the animal into your catch cup. This does pose a little bit more of a risk when you're working with arboreal species that can be more tending to bite, because if they run up here, there's a very real possibility they can also run out and onto your hand. So that's something you always want to be mindful of, especially with some of the more fast or quick species. That does put you kind of more in the danger zone, but just as much as any of the other ways as well. The other way that you could do, that I know a lot of people do, is they take the enclosure, the old enclosure, and open it up and then put it right up to the edge of the new enclosure and then scoot the animal out into there. Same thing though, you can run into issues with your hands possibly being in a precarious position, but it's just something to be mindful of when you're working with them. If you're new to tarantulas, I definitely don't recommend old world species, stuff from Africa and Asia. Typically they tend to be a more defensive animal and their venom tends to be a lot more potent, whereas new world species tend to be a little bit more laid back, less inclined to bite, and a little bit easier to work. So this is an old world species right here. The Poecilotheria fusca is one of my favorite kinds of tarantula. And so I'm going to be doing a quick rehouse here, and hopefully this will go pretty smoothly so I can kind of demonstrate how I typically do things when I'm working with these. So I'm just going to take the lid off here real quick, and let's see what this animal is. So I'll use my tweezers to take a peek in here. And if I need to remove something from here, like this little leaf, I will do that. Put that off to the side. And the animal is right in here. So what I'm going to try to do is take out this cork bark. And we will take it. So the animal is right here. What I'm going to try and do is just scoot it. So when I'm moving the animal from one enclosure to the other, I want to line up the sides as much as possible so it's a smooth transition. So when this animal goes to walk, it's not missing the edge or having nothing to grab onto. Like if you miss the edge right here, it won't have anything to grab onto and it'll often run off to the side. So if you try to line it up as much as possible and kind of give it a direction to go in, a lot of times this animal will go right that way. So see if I can manipulate this spider right here. You can see they really don't want to leave their home because it's where they know. So I'm just going to try and gently direct her this way. And of course she's going to want to go out. There we go. And right in there. So generally pretty easy rehouse right there. Nothing too scary going on. And then I can safely put the lid on and that animal's done a successful rehouse. So this will give this animal a couple molts inside of this enclosure before I upgrade it into its final size enclosure. But pretty smooth, just something that, a lot of people ask me tips and tricks on how I work with things. And that's generally just how I do it. So that's one rehouse. We're going to do another quick rehouse right here real quick, and then we'll work with an animal that is not going to give me as easy of a time. So this next rehouse I'm going to be doing right here is with a Haplocosmia himalayana. And this one's just about adult size. And so I'm just going to be upgrading her into a slightly bigger enclosure. Just want to give her a little bit more space, something a little bit nicer than what she's got right now. So the last rehouse that I did, I just did, scoot the animal from the enclosure to another enclosure. For this one, I'll be demonstrating the other way that I do rehouses by using a catch cup and scooting the animal into there, and then I can rehouse it from there. So what I'm going to do is go right into this enclosure. See, they like to web quite a bit. And so what I'm going to try to do is get this catch cup over here where I think she's going to want to go, and then try to scoot her that way. And the main thing whenever you're doing a rehouse is stay nice and calm, because if you panic, there's a very real probability or possibility that you could make a mistake. So I always try to stay nice and calm. And even if the animal skitters for whatever reason, you've got this basin or this catch area to give you a little bit of time to think before you react. Even if it does get out of the enclosure, it's still contained, and that's why I also do rehouses in the bathtub. And so, got this animal into the little catch cup right here. Take a quick peek at her. She's really pretty. Really pretty animal. And then we will stick her back into her new enclosure. So what I'll do I usually block off part of the enclosure so that when she runs in, she doesn't actually get out the other side. And hopefully this will work smoothly. Place the cup down even, and then just work on scooting her into her new abode. There we go. And I can safely remove this cup. Take the lid, place it in its area, and there we go. Right into our new house. So we're going to do another demo real quick with an animal that is probably going to run, just so I can demonstrate what I usually do with an animal that's like that, and then we'll kind of wrap up. So this next animal I'm going to show you guys is a Ebiropora diversipes. These are formerly an avicularia species. So a smaller arboreal New World species. They're not very inclined to bite, but they are kind of quick. This particular animal and most of the diversipes that I've worked with in the past have always given me a hard time with being very quick and running and jumping and things like that. So this was a good one that I feel would be good to show to kind of give you an idea of what to do if you do get an animal that does run, like your OBTs, like these Ebiropora diversipes and some of the other species that you might be coming in contact with. So going to do a quick little demo here just to show you guys kind of what I'm working with. So I've got my tool to manipulate with. I've got my catch cup here, and so I'm just going to give this animal a little bit of touch, and you'll see it'll run right out onto the edge of the enclosure. Sometimes you'll get ones that'll run all the way around and all over the place, which is why I recommend either doing your rehouses in a bin or in a bathtub or something like that. See if I can get it to move a little bit here. So you'll see it's going right along the walls in here. Try and give it a catch cup to go to. And if I can get it up on the wall, that way I can put the catch cup right on down over the top of it. When you get a catch cup over an animal like this, or any species, you can either use the lid to try and kind of try to manipulate them into the right position, or you can use a note card or something like that. But the ideal situation is do not pinch their legs, because they can drop off their legs. Even though they will regrow them the next time that they molt out their exoskeleton, it can still be stressful on the animal. It can still damage them. And you also want to be very careful of the abdomen, the back portion, the butt portion, because that is where all of their vital organs are, and it's not protected by their exoskeleton. It's pretty much just skin. So it's very important to have your catch cup on hand at all times, even when you're just doing general maintenance, feeding and watering and things like that, just in case the animal decides to make a run for it, come out of the enclosure or what have you. So I always have a catch cup on hand, even when I'm just doing regular maintenance things. With certain species, it's not as big of an issue. Your rose hares, your brachypelma species, your ground dwelling stuff, generally not too much of an issue. But I keep a lot of arboreal things that like to climb and have a tendency to run. So I always have a catch cup on hand just to be on the safe side. And that way, you can stay nice and calm. When you're working with the animal, try not to hurt it, try not to scare it as much as possible, and then, work with the animal and just try to get it back into its enclosure where it's nice and safe. So whenever you're doing your rehousing or your cage maintenance or things like that, it's always important to have your tools on hand just so that everybody stays nice and safe and the spider stays nice and safe.